So let's talk about alcohol. So alcohol is completely legal, but that doesn't mean that they can drink and drive. So with that, the alcohol facts: alcohol is a drug and classed as a depressant. An average of 56% of people drink at least once a month. An estimated 88,000 alcohol-related deaths happen annually. Alcohol is a factor in 29% of suicides, 40% of homicides, 55% of domestic violence cases. 29% of all motor vehicle accident fatalities involve alcohol. Lowered inhibitions leading to poor social judgment. This is the short-term physical effects. Trouble concentrating, loss of coordination, loss of critical judgment, dulled perception, especially vision, mood swings, reduced core body temperature, raised blood pressure, passing out, vomiting. Here is the long-term physical effects: diminished gray matter and white matter in the brain, memory loss, loss of attention span, trouble learning, alcoholic hepatitis, liver fibrosis, steatosis, throat, mouth, larynx, breast, liver, colorectal, esophageal cancer, high blood pressure, cardiomyopathy, stroke, irregular heartbeat, all of this from alcohol. Right here, somebody who passed out. This is why, one reason why drivers do pre-trip inspections, why they do post-trip inspections. Do your inspections before you get in that truck, because you never know what idiot decides to fall asleep in your vehicle without you seeing it. So the effects of blood alcohol concentrations. So at a 0.02, typical effects are some loss of judgment, relaxed, slight body warmth, altered mood. 0.02 is nothing like they're not totally wasted. Predictable effects on driving: decline in visual functions, rapid tracking of movement target, decline in ability to perform two tasks at the same time, distracted, their attention's divided. 0.05, which is still technically legal. So this is not legal for drivers of CMV operations. Actually, no alcohol is legal, but whether they get put out of service for 24 hours or whether they get arrested, two totally different things. So at a 0.04, they'll actually get arrested. Anything below, if they're a 0.02, they're going to get put out of service for 24 hours. Exaggerated behavior may have loss of small muscle control, focusing your eyes, impaired judgment, usually a good feeling, lowered alertness, release of inhibition. On driving, reduced coordination, reduced ability to track moving, steering difficulties, reduced response to emergency driving situations. At a 0.08, a 0.08 is the legal limit for anybody. Like I said, for commercial motor vehicles, it's 0.04. If you're a CDL driver, it's 0.04, or in a commercial motor vehicle. So muscle coordination becomes poor, balance, speech, vision, reaction time, and hearing, harder to detect danger, judgment, self-control, reasoning, and memory are impaired. With driving, concentration, short-term memory loss, speed control, reduced information processing capabilities, seeing that there actually was a stop sign there, seeing the stoplight, that it was red and not green. Impaired perception, knowing how far away other cars are from you. At a 0.10, clear deterioration of reaction time and control, slurred speech, poor coordination, and slowed thinking. With driving, reduced ability to maintain lane position and brake appropriately. So that's when you start seeing swerving in the lanes. At a 0.15, far less muscle control than normal. Vomiting may occur unless this level is reached really, really slow, or a person has developed a tolerance, major loss of balance. Substantial impairment in vehicle control, attention to driving, and necessary visual or auditory information processing. That is heavily affected at that point. So here's some psychological effects: dependence, denial, rationalization, confusion, decreased self-control or increased aggressiveness, and mood swings. This all pretty much happens usually when people are drunk, while they're drunk, not just over time, but this is typically what happens. So what's considered a violation? Impaired or under the influence of alcohol, a 0.02 BAC or higher. So if they're a 0.02, requires 24-hour removal, not disqualification. So that wouldn't necessarily not mean that if they test a 0.02, depending on what your company policy says, if you have a zero tolerance policy, that's one thing. But at a 0.02, typically 24 hours removal, not necessarily disqualification. Use of alcohol during certain prohibited time periods. Pre-duty, they cannot use any alcohol. 4 hours preceding performance of a safety sensitive function. Now this is the regulation. On duty, use of alcohol while performing safety sensitive functions. They cannot use any alcohol. So they can't go have lunch and drink a beer, even though they're under the limit, even though they might be under a .02, they still can't go and drink a beer while they're on duty, while they're intending to be driving. So on-call throughout the employee's on-call hours if it called into work. So that doesn't mean there's plenty of employees that are on-call 24/7. They just are. That doesn't mean they can never drink alcohol. What it means is if they do drink and you call them and say, hey, you need to come into work, they need to tell you, hey, I've been drinking, I can't come into work. They have to do that. They have to say, yeah, you called me into work, but I've been drinking beer, so I can't come. Post-accident, up to 8 hours following a DOT recordable collision or testing, whichever occurs first. They cannot go drink anything after a crash until they've had their testing done for at least 8 hours or until that test is done. Refusing to be tested is treated as positive. If they refuse an alcohol test, they're going to treat it as positive. Using cold remedies, NyQuil, cough syrup, that have alcohol in them. Alcohol prohibition rules apply to over-the-counter medications. Safety-sensitive employees may not use any medications that contain alcohol. So you treat over-the-counter medications like NyQuil or cough syrup or even mouthwash. That's why I have a picture of mouthwash in here. Even mouthwash, they cannot, if it has alcohol in it, they cannot consume that while on duty or within 4 hours of being on duty. Alcohol testing done is according to federal guidelines. Strict chain of custody control processes in place. Testing performed use of federally evidentiary breath testing, the EBTs. Testing must be performed by a trained breath alcohol technician or a BAT. If they're not trained, if they are not certified to do breath tests, then it's not going to be good for DOT purposes. An initial screen is performed. So this is what happens with the testing process with alcohol. So if tests are less than a .02 negative result, if they're at a .02, it's a negative result, okay? If results are at or above a .02, a confirmation test is performed within 15 to 20 minutes. So they have to have a confirmation test. So they'll sit there, they'll blow in the breathalyzer, and if it's above a .02 or at a .02, then they wait 15 to 20 minutes to see if that level comes down at all. And if it goes down, then you know that it's been a while since they drank. But if it actually goes up, then they just drank something pretty much right before they walked in or shortly before they walked in. If results confirmation tests are between the .02 and .039, then employee removed for safety-sensitive functions for 24 hours, contact HR for disciplinary action. So yes, maybe they went and had a beer at work because they were riding with somebody else, they were not driving, but that's, maybe what they did. Then in that case, you might, depending on your policy, remove them from a safety-sensitive position, don't let them come back to work for 24 hours, tell them they have to take the day off. But for driving purposes, they still can't drive. They will be put out of service. So alcohol testing process, if the results of the confirmatory test are a .04, they're removed from the safety-sensitive position. That's basically like getting a DWI or DUI. They basically just went over the legal limit at a .04, not a .08. Normal states, most states have it at a .08, but then there's some states that have .04 or .06. Some, I don't know that any are higher, but it's possible. Termination is likely if you have a zero tolerance policy. So both negative and positive results are reported, and they're almost immediate almost every time. You get the little strip and it comes out almost like a credit card receipt, and then they attach that. The MRO is still notified, and the MRO still has to confirm, but for breath testing, you get the results right then and there. And it will tell you exactly how much is in their system right then and there. So incomplete specimens or samples. An employee who's unable to provide enough urine or blow hard enough into the breath test, then they're going to be referred to a doctor. And that doctor, if the physician determines that a medical condition could have prevented the employee from providing adequate breath or urine, then the employee's failure to do so will not be considered refusal. But if no medical condition exists, now this is a doctor that, for one, has to understand why the person is there. The MRO is the one that calls the doctor, and then you have to set that up to say that the employee says, well, there's a bunch of valid reasons why somebody would not be able to give enough urine. Maybe they have an enlarged prostate. Maybe they have a kidney infection, a bladder infection, something like that. There's lots of reasons why somebody might not be able to give enough breath in a breath test. Maybe they have bronchitis. Maybe they have pneumonia. Maybe they have congestive heart failure. You just don't know. Obviously, some of those things would probably disqualify them as a driver anyway, but for some of them, not. It doesn't disqualify them as a driver. At that point, their physician, even a physician that you choose, has to recertify them. They have to be notified, and you have to say, is there a reason why this person would not be able to give a sufficient amount of urine for this drug test or a sufficient amount of breath for this breath test? And then the doctor will decide. If they decide that there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to, they don't have any of these things, then it's going to be considered a refusal and therefore a positive result. So be aware of abnormal behavior, but also be aware of things that you see in or around a driver's vehicle. If you see a lot of hairspray and your driver's bald, it might make you say, If you see 3 or 4 cans of rubber cement or spray paint or paint thinner, or not just 1 bottle of mouthwash, but like 10 bottles of mouthwash, lots of nail polish. I mean, unless your driver paints his nails or uses nail polish for some other reason, then it might make you say, why is this stuff in this truck? There's no reason why paint thinner would be in a vehicle unless they're huffing it. Or unless maybe they have a valid reason, like they bought it because they're going to go home and they're doing some kind of work at home. Who knows? But Aquanet really doesn't have any purpose other than hairspray or drinking it. There's other things that make you say, like this kind of stuff. This would be totally normal for a mechanic or a driver to possibly have a bolt in his pocket. What wouldn't be normal, though, is having a can of dog food in a driver's truck when they don't have a dog. That would be abnormal. Having a can of beer, obviously. Can't have beer anyway. Why they would put that, I don't know. But like I said, hairspray, just weird things. But all of these things, they look like normal products. And even the Coca-Cola bottle here, it actually is filled with liquid that looks like soda. But if you look underneath, it's actually fake. And there's a space in here where you hide stuff. So look for stash containers, nug jugs. They're all called different kind of things. But little things they can put. This is a necklace. They actually put pills in here, so they always have it around their neck. Just look for things that make you say, that just kind of doesn't match up. If you have that driver that always has that can of Red Bull in his pocket and you've never actually seen him drink Red Bull, it might make you say, why is that? And you have every right as an employer, as long as it's in your company policy, to search your truck. If it's your truck, you have a right to search it. It's your vehicle, and that part doesn't have to be in your company policy, but notifying the driver that there is no expectation for privacy and stuff that's company owned, that part is important to have in there. Even if it's not company owned, if you have a right to search them on your premises, then you need to notify them of that, and they need to understand that. All safety sensitive employees are subject to reasonable suspicion testing. There is no exceptions, exemptions. They just all are subject to it. Verify your state laws on what to do if positive results are received. Vermont and Minnesota have stricter rules. So there probably are some other states that have rules specific to what to do if you receive positive results, but I do know that they have some stricter rules. Always inform HR when an employee is being tested for reasonable suspicion. So you always inform HR, but that doesn't mean you have to wait for HR to tell you, okay. Reasonable suspicion, for one, there's time sensitive. Time is of the essence. With alcohol, you have to get them in for testing within a reasonable amount of time. Otherwise, it's not effective. But if you are the DER, if you are somebody that's a supervisor that has reasonable suspicion, You need to address it now. If your HR department, if you're coming in on a Saturday and you're working on a Saturday, what, you're going to wait until Monday to discuss it with HR? No. You're going to do what you need to do to make sure that you keep, for one, that driver safe, your other employees safe, but the public safe. If you feel like there's a reasonable suspicion, act on it. Keep opinions to yourself. The only time you share your opinion with somebody else is whenever you are trying to obtain a witness. But make sure all the variables are analyzed. So look at allergies, colds, inner ear infections. That can make people very wobbly. Physical maladies. Make sure that you're paying attention. You're not automatically assuming that they're on drugs, because they might not be. They might actually be sick. Like I said, they might be having a diabetic seizure or a heart attack or have an inner ear infection or have some other stuff going on. Maybe they're super depressed, sleeping in their car because their wife kicked them out, stole their dog and all his money. You never know why somebody does what they do until you start analyzing the facts. Not your opinion, but the facts. Only supervisors trained to recognize the signs of drug abuse and train in reasonable suspicion need, for one, to even hear your opinion. And those are the only people that will be your witness or be a secondary opinion. If they're not trained in reasonable suspicion and they're not a supervisor, then do not get them involved. What I see too many times is busy Betty running her mouth all over the yard and the shop and the office, talking about how, oh my God, did you see Billy? He was high on marijuana. Well, busy Betty, for one, shouldn't know that. If she's not a supervisor, she shouldn't, that's not her business. So she shouldn't be spreading drama like that. It's gossip at that point. Right now, it's an opinion. It's a reasonable suspicion. Keep it to yourself. Find another supervisor who's trained and say, hey, I kind of have some suspicion on this guy. Will you go observe and tell me what you think? And then come back together, discuss it. If both of you agree, at that point, then go on to the documentation part. So signs and symptoms, behavioral drug or alcohol use will typically cause significant changes in the employee's physical condition, physical appearance, their mood, their personality, their attitude, changes in their family life. But sometimes it happens slowly over a period of time. So here's the detection periods. Here's the detection periods, and they vary based on the rates of metabolism. Like I said, with marijuana, sometimes it can stay in there 4 to 6 weeks, but sometimes it's 3 days, sometimes it's 8 weeks. It just depends. So for each different drug and, the person themselves, but amphetamines typically 1 to 2 days. This is why you can't wait for HR to show up on Monday and then notify them and get their approval. It doesn't work that way, because the levels they're gone already. Amphetamines 1 to 2 days, cocaine 2 to 3 days, marijuana 1 to 30 days, could be 60 days. Alcohol 0 to 24 hours. Opioids up to 2 days. They could be totally high on OxyContin on Friday, and if you wait till Monday, it's going to be totally out of their system. You won't even know the difference. PCP 8 to 30 days, depending, right? But what about bath salts? What about all these other things? Just because they're not tested with FMCSA does not mean that it does not impair them. They need to not be in a truck. There's plenty of other things that impair people's ability to drive and function and operate a commercial motor vehicle, or any vehicle for that matter, that's not illegal. So observation, suspicion, accident involving. So this step 1, this is maybe you starting to suspect. So step 1, accident involving the company vehicle, or maybe just a non-vehicular on the job accident. They dropped a hammer on their foot. They cut their leg. They cut their finger off. Finding paraphernalia in a assigned vehicle with unusual behavior using the checklist. So finding paraphernalia in somebody's vehicle doesn't necessarily warrant reasonable suspicion. It definitely raises reasonable suspicion for somebody had drugs in your vehicle. But who's to say it was that particular person? If it was assigned to that driver and you know for darn sure that nobody else has been in that vehicle, including his friends and family, if he takes it home, then you would have reasonable suspicion, obviously. But if there's other employees that access that vehicle, you can't just use that alone. Severe changes in the employee's behavior, attitudes, physical appearance, speech, or body odors. So if you have paraphernalia as well as have some of those other things, the changes in their attitude, behavior, all that stuff, then obviously that would warrant moving to step 2. At that point, you're going to prepare for testing. You're going to begin reasonable suspicion testing forms and documentation. Document, document, document. I cannot stress this enough. Have another trained supervisor concur your suspicion. Like I said, if they're not trained in reasonable suspicion, they don't need to be talking to you. Not about this, at least. Complete observation checklist. So with this training, you actually are getting the forms that you can use to do this, or you might have forms that are internal to your company, use those. But either way, use a checklist. Don't just say, well, I saw this and I saw that, and document and write notes. A checklist is almost always easier because then it keeps everything pretty uniform that way. Maintain confidentiality. Like I said, don't be going telling Betty Body anything, or Busy Betty anything. It's none of her business. Notify human resources. Remove employee from safety sensitive position. Like I said, if you're there on a Saturday or Friday night, HR has already left for the day, or they're not there for the weekend, of course you're going to notify human resources when they get back to the office, unless they're on call all the time, but you don't have to wait for them. Remove employee from safety sensitive position. Now, like I said, this is part of what your drug and alcohol policy should cover. It's not going to tell the employees this won't necessarily be in your drug and alcohol policy, all of these steps. This is going to be in a supervisor's policy though. This is the steps that we follow, this is what we do, and this is how we do it. This needs to be documented and written somewhere that this is what they're supposed to do. Is there reasonable suspicion? So now you've documented it, you've checked, all your checked, their eyes are glossy, their clothes smell like marijuana, this, and you're going to answer all these questions down this checklist. Interview the employee. So don't just assume because you have all these suspicions and yeah, you checked off a few things that they must be stoned, or they must be on drugs, or they must be, cracked out of their mind, whatever you think it may be. Interview the employee. They have a right to talk to you. The only time I would say do not interview the employee is if it's very obvious that they are on some kind of hallucinogen, and then at that point just call the cops. Because sometimes when you approach people that are in that state of mind, it's dangerous. They are dangerous. So I would say that's usually the only case where I would say, I don't want to say only, but that's one of the cases where I would say don't even approach them at that point. Just if they're acting that erratically, just call the cops. Interview employee in private with the witness. It should not just be you and that person. It should be the other person that concurred with your observation. Take detailed notes. Watch the demeanor of the employee. Yeah, I'm not an expert on lie detectors and how to catch people lying or anything, but there are some clues. Usually they're fidgety. Usually they're, making up a bunch of stories. They talk too much, whatever it may be. Inform the employee of why they're in there, and just be straight with them. Look, I found some drugs in your truck, and you're kind of acting a little out of normal behavior lately. You've lost a lot of weight, you've acting a little moody, you're doing all these things, and just go down the checklist. You don't have to just say, this is what I've noticed from you. This is why. So with that said, I have reasonable suspicion, and I'd like to go ahead and get you tested. And ask them questions. Zip it from there and just ask them questions and say, is there anything that you'd like to tell me? A lot of times they'll just tell you. They'll tell you exactly what they've been doing, what they're on, hoping that you'll show them mercy and not tell anybody, especially if you guys have a really good relationship, especially if you, because supervisors can be friends with their employees. The difference is that as a supervisor, you have to realize that you have to be able to separate, yes, I'm your friend, but I'm your boss here. So right now I'm your boss and there is no covering up. But you can say, have you taken any medications prescribed to you? Maybe they're prescriptions. Perfectly okay if they are, they just can't be working. Allow the employee to tell his or her side of the story. Always use a calm voice, be objective, ask questions, and make sure they're non-threatening. One thing that is definitely not good is don't be one of those judgmental people saying, oh my God, I can't believe you're using drugs. Well, come on, really? if you determine that reasonable suspicion no longer exists, so maybe they're like, you know what, I've actually had an inner ear infection. I went to my doctor and it, you know, or maybe I have a really bad back and it causes my blah, 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 whatever. But if you feel like, you know what, I really don't think that it's drugs. They totally communicate with me. Their clothes smell bad because their grandma smokes pot all day long because she's got cancer, or they live in their car, so their clothes just stink. Whatever it may be, maybe they don't shower. Document it. So document the conclusion and say both me as this supervisor and the other supervisor both agree that there's no reasonable suspicion involved here, but you still have to document it. You still have to notify HR of your decision, and you still have to justify why you had that reasonable suspicion in the first place, because what if you're wrong? What if the driver then, you said, you know what, I really don't think there was suspicion, so we didn't do the reasonable suspicion test, and then 3 hours later he gets in a wreck and he kills somebody. Holy cow, what do you think the lawyers are going to do with that? So in either scenario, whether you decide that there's reasonable suspicion or not, there was enough to start the process. So there is enough to remove that employee from a safety sensitive position for at least 24 hours, period. There is no reason, if you have reasonable suspicion and you started that documentation and you started that process, to then put them in a truck. Under no circumstances. Obviously it was enough to distract you, probably enough to distract them. So inform the employee that a new medical exam may be required. So maybe, yes, they do have all these excuses. Maybe it's totally valid. Maybe for whatever reason, to say, you know what, anytime we have this happen, we always require a new physical. So we feel like you need to go to the doctor and you need to get a new medical exam before you can return to work. So at least for 24 hours, but also they need to take a new medical exam. Be careful not to let emotion drive this determination. In most cases, the test should be administered regardless of excuse. Very rarely are you going to actually hear an excuse from somebody. If you really had enough reasonable suspicion to go contact another supervisor, have him observe, do the documentation, and it's okay if it comes up negative. I mean, that's what the whole purpose of the reasonable suspicion testing is. But don't let your emotions, don't let the fact that you really like this person or that you feel really bad for this person affect your decision. You are responsible for ensuring the safety of not only that driver, but the other employees in that area, the other employees that work for this company or your company, as well as the public. You are responsible at this point. So if you choose not to do that reasonable suspicion test after starting the process and documenting, doing all this stuff, seriously question why. Why are you not wanting to do it at this point? Is it because you feel bad? Is it because you believe them? It's okay to still continue to do the test even if you believe them. That's just my personal opinion, because at the end of the day, it's your butt. You're the one that's going to get in trouble. You're the one that can potentially go to jail if they get in a crash and they kill somebody. I mean, if they kill somebody and they kill themselves, they're dead. They're not going to prison, but they're going to try to hold somebody accountable, especially if it's a high-profile case. So if you determine that reasonable suspicion does exist, if the employee declines testing, inform the employee that what the company policy is, not to mention what federal regulation is. So if they refuse reasonable suspicion, it's automatically recorded as a positive. They just tested positive. So just let them know that, hey, you have every right to refuse the test. But if you do, we're going to report it as a positive result, which means you just flunked a drug test and you didn't even take one. How would you like to proceed? Sometimes they'll just say, you know what, I'm going to refuse to take the test and I quit. Okay, just know it's a positive result. Now I have to report it. Restate to the employee the reasons for the test. Have employees sign consent to submit to alcohol or drug testing reasonable suspicion. It's always better to document. So if they'll sign a form saying, yes, I'm consenting, honestly, if they have nothing to hide, they probably wouldn't mind being tested. It's probably not that big of a deal to them. Have employees sign the incident report form, call the collection site testing center to let them know you're going to be on the way. So with reasonable suspicion, for one, it's an observed collection. So they automatically have to lift their shirt up, pull their pants down, spin it around in a circle, and show their whole business. Anytime reasonable suspicion is, that's the cause for the test, they do an observed collection. So notifying the collection facility in advance and saying, hey, I might have a reasonable suspicion test, or I am going to have reasonable suspicion here in the next 20 minutes. We'll be there in 20 minutes, whatever it may be, however far it is. Give them kind of a heads up, because sometimes they don't always have a male collector on site at the moment, especially on weekends, or sometimes they don't have a female if it's a female driver. So just give them a heads up and say, hey, I'm going to be coming down. It's going to be a reasonable suspicion. Are we okay to come down? And they'll tell you right then, no, we don't have a male collector here today. Try this collection facility, and you might have to go to a different collection facility. And at that point, they can then transfer the chain of custodies over if they have them. But give them a heads up. But don't take, of course, 4 hours to get there, because time is of the essence here. Time matters. Do not delay. So, like I said, time matters. It's of the essence. You have specific timeline if you suspect them of alcohol use to do the breath test. So don't delay. Don't stop and get food. They're going to say, you know, drivers will, oh my gosh, I'm really thirsty. I don't have to pee. I'm going to have to get water before I pee. And they'll want you to stop for, you know, a gallon of water, because they want to down that water all the way there, because they think that's going to help them. It's actually not going to help them. It's probably going to hurt them more. But, you know, they'll come up with every excuse for you to stop somewhere and get something, because they might have called somebody and had them drop something off in the bathroom of that gas station that they can go pick it up. And then now they're going to drink the water, plus they're going to drink this clean out stuff, which 99% of the time doesn't work, but in rare cases it actually does. So transport the employee to the collection site. This is for you. This is for you or the other supervisor who concurred with your reasonable suspicion. You should not have busybody Betty taking them to the collection site. It's none of her business. The only people that should be taking them are the people who were in the room who decided that reasonable suspicion exists. So yes, it needs to be you or the other supervisor that takes them physically to the collection site. Step number 4, testing and or removal. Stay with the employee at all times until the testing is complete. So you're sitting in the waiting room waiting with them just like everybody else. You're sitting there the whole time. You're driving them, you're following them. If you decide to walk into a gas station, you're walking in with them and you're following around the whole time. I don't recommend stopping at a gas station or anywhere else on the way to the collection site, but just in case. Don't stop for drinks or any other reason along the way. Keep discussion to a minimum and off topic while en route. They're going to want to talk about all these reasons why you're wrong, or all these reasons why they do the drugs that they do. It's okay having talks. It's okay communicating with them, but it shouldn't be about that, because anytime you have that instance, you want a witness present. But keep it to a minimum. I just say sometimes it's better to be quiet, and you know, if they want to talk all day long, let them talk, but that doesn't mean you have to talk. So just keep it to a minimum. Once at the testing facility, allow them to do their job. So allow the collection facility to do their job. At that point, once the driver is signed in, then you can go outside. If you want to go outside, they still have to wait there, but let them do their job. Okay, so when testing is complete, take the employee home to their preferred location. Ensure that the employee has completed all the necessary documents before you drop them off, though. So sometimes, whether you do this at the office before you go to the collection facility, or I would prefer to do it there and not at the collection facility, because the people at the collection facility don't know that they're there for a reasonable suspicion. They might think that they're there for pre-employment, so it's none of their business either. And I don't mean the people that work at the collection facility, I mean the other people getting tested. So my preference is have all the documentation done before you leave for the collection facilities, like the release signatures of, yes, I know I'm going to get tested. Yes, I know this is what happens if I fail, blah, 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 whatever documents you may have. Inform the employee of the next steps. So this is what happens a lot. You're going to take the employee to get tested, and then you drop them off at home, and then you don't call them for 3 days, and the next day he calls and say, hey, when can I come back to work? Thinking that, well, the drug test must be back by now. Let them know that it could take up to 72 hours. And whether this is paid time off, whether this is not paid time off, all of those things. So with the test results, here's kind of what you need to let them know, and it's all based on your company policy. So don't take this as to this is what has to be done. Let them know that the results may take up to 72 hours to receive. So that means they can't work until that time. Documents must be completed before results are issued. Have clearly defined procedures in the company policy about what they get paid, what the expectations are of the employee while they're waiting for these results. Do you expect them to come back to work and do light duty? I don't recommend that, but maybe the case. Do you expect them to just stay home? How are you going to pay them? Are they just not going to get paid? And then if it comes back positive, they don't get paid for any of that time? Or if it comes back negative, do you pay them? Best practice is that the employee remains off duty until notified of test results. If results are negative, pay them for the lost wages. So they're not going to miss anything on their paycheck. If it is negative, pay them for the time. So if they normally work 8 hours, pay them for the full 8 hours. Even though, yes, they had 3 days off, but they tested negative. That is best practice. You need to check your state laws on how you have to handle it, but also check with your company policy or your HR and how they want to approach that. But that's very much best practice for you to pay somebody if they come back with a negative test result. If it's positive, obviously you don't have to pay them for the time that they didn't work. But again, that's up to your company policy, whether you're in union or not. All of that stuff is clearly defined in union stuff. So document final outcome and move on. Move on. You're done. It's over. Whether you terminate somebody because they tested positive, whether you they tested negative, and now you document that it was a negative test result, put it in their files. Don't bring it up again. It's over. It's done. If you decide if they test positive and you put them in a SAP program, then you're going to follow that part. If results are positive, meet with the employee to discuss the company drug and alcohol policy. Follow company procedure for disciplinary action. Refer the employee to the SAP near the employee's home. So your location, your office location might be 50 miles away from where they live. So it's really simple to just Google SAP counselors, DOT SAP counselors. Make sure that they're actually DOT and not just a regular SAP counselor, because there's drug counselors and then there's DOT drug counselors. So for a SAP to be qualified, it needs to be a DOT. So refer close to their home, close to where they're at. Discuss SAP process regardless of the outcome of their employment. So whether you decide to terminate or not, it doesn't matter. You still have to discuss these things with the driver if they are, if they'll let you. Sometimes they just don't let you. But you're going to discuss the steps, discuss the process, what's expected of them, inform the employee that you must report results to the state or federal clearinghouse. Right now it's state, pretty soon it's going to be federal clearinghouse. And notify the state or the federal agency if that's what is required. So here's some do's. Do confiscate any contraband or evidence that is observed. I don't want to get you in trouble in here. This is what you do need to do. Don't confiscate anything if legally it's going to put you in harm's way. So if you see any contraband or evidence, call the police, have them come do it. That would be my suggestion. Be consistent with, unless in that case you don't know whose contraband it actually is. Be consistent with all employees. Just because the owner loves his son and his son works there, and now you got all these drivers and his son is also a driver, doesn't mean the son gets special treatment. They must be treated exactly the same as everybody else. It doesn't matter who they are at all. It doesn't matter if it's the owner of the company. If the company owner is in that same situation and they go through the same process as everybody else, or you have reasonable suspicion of the owner being on drugs just like everybody else, and they are a driver, it's still your responsibility to call them out on it. So yeah, maybe they can still own the company, but they don't get to drive trucks anymore. And that's just something that sometimes it's a kind of a fine line. But interview the employee in private. Have another trained supervisor concur and witness the interview. Consult with HR when dealing with it. Use employee interview guide. Do not hold the employee against their will. Can't do that. That's false imprisonment. Do not violate the employee's privacy by discussing it with other employees or, yelling at them in front of everybody. That's just not cool. Use past incidents or behavior as cause. What they've done in the past has nothing to do with you having reasonable suspicion today, other than the fact that in the last month you've noticed these specific signs. So you're going to go just down the checklist, not other things. Stick to the checklist. Don't put your hands on an employee for any reason. You're not grabbing their shoulder and pushing them down in the seat and saying, hey, I need you to sit down, or don't do that. at that point. That's assault or battery or both. Beat around the bush or use antidotes. Don't make this funny. Don't make this, you know, a joke or anything like this. Is serious. So make sure that they understand that, yes, this is serious. So you sit in your chair, they're going to sit in their chair, and you're going to say, look, I have a problem. Here's a problem I have. I've noticed this and this and this, and go down the checklist. And don't beat around the bush. Be direct. Don't apply DOT tests to non-regulated employees. Big mistake. Do not DOT drug test non-DOT regulated employees, and do not DOT drug tests whenever you're supposed to. Okay, so DOT does require safety-sensitive employees to test who have previously tested positive for drugs without retesting with a negative result. Previously tested above a 0.04 breath alcohol test. So that's basically kind of like a DUI, DWI without necessarily having to be stopped by an officer. Refuse to submit to a drug or alcohol test. To be tested prior to performing safety-sensitive duties, and employees must complete a SAP evaluation to follow SAP recommendations. So here's the process. I'm going to give you a short overview, and like I said, if you are the DER or the person in charge of managing this program, managing SAPs, things like that, then go ahead and watch that other section, the SAP management session that we have. It's really important that you understand what that process is, because way too many mistakes are made in SAP programs. But the basics of it are, whether you're going to fire them or not, you have to refer them to a SAP. So even if you're terminating, you still have to refer them. You still have to give them that process of what to expect, what happens whenever they test positive or refuse a drug test or alcohol test. You have to give them that notification and refer them to the SAP, or at least attempt to. At that point, the driver's responsibility is to go to that SAP counselor. They have to make the initial appointment with the counselor. They have to go to that appointment. From that point, the counselor will decide what steps must be taken for the driver to do. Most of the time, it's either an 8 or a 16-hour class, or maybe it's inpatient treatment. Maybe it's outpatient. But they're the ones that decide that, not you. The counselor is the one that decides that. And then they say, okay, well, I'm going to have you take this many classes, and then from there, come back, we're going to reevaluate, and then they'll give them their letter that says they've completed that, and now they can do their return to duty test. If you keep them on, and yes, now that they can do their return to duty test, but that doesn't mean they're finished. And a lot of people think that they're finished. Drivers think that they're finished once they've done that. Oh yeah, I can just, you know, do drugs, get caught, test positive, and now all I got to do is go to a couple of classes, and now I get a letter saying I can go back to work. That's not how it works. So I highly recommend you watch the whole SAP management program session. If you're not responsible for that, just understand that just because somebody's completed a SAP return to duty test doesn't mean that they're finished. But your employees need to know what that process is, and they can't know the full process either. That's for the counselor to tell them to. But just let them know that it's going to be a long process. It is not a short 6-week or even 4-week or anything like that. It can be anywhere from 12 months to a year, or to 5 years. It can be anywhere from a year to a 5-year process of testing and retesting and testing and testing and testing. Up to 5 years. It's serious and it's expensive. And most of the time drivers have to pay for it themselves. So understanding your company policies, knowing what is in place, having those policies in place before anything like this ever happens, because if it's not clearly defined to drivers, for one, they get confused, you get confused, people wait way too long in between testing to get the test done that they're supposed to be getting done. So have everything done in advance and ready to go. So if you have any questions, email me at info@readyfordot.com. You can go to our website, DOT Readiness Group. Go to LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, subscribe, because anytime I put a ton of free content out there as well as trainings like this. So whenever I do the free content, if you subscribe to our social media, you'll get notified that we actually have free content out there, of course. So make sure you set it for notifications. If you're interested in going digital and doing all this stuff digital, all your papers digital, including accident reporting, drug and alcohol testing issues, stuff like that, go to dot-ready.com and watch our demo. Schedule a demo through that website and watch the demo on the software to see what it can do and how it kind of relates to the drug and alcohol testing portion. So with that said, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know you're crazy busy. So thanks. Have a great day.